Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Between Two Teachers. And my name is Consuelo Lara.
I'm Madeline Kronenberg.
And we're bringing you our views and perspectives and news about updates about what's new in education, locally, nationally, all over the world. So we're going to get started with our national updates.
Yes, we are. But before that, I do want to mention
yes.
You got to see this our Adam the Fern, and in front of Adam today is a piece of the Berlin Wall, and that is because today is the 30th anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down. And I happen to have a piece of it, so I thought, well, okay, there it is. There's our piece of the Berlin Wall. And that was a very significant day, and this has been a really significant week. This was an election week. So first we want to start with some updates around things we discussed last week. And the first one is Virginia. Virginia has both of its houses, its legislative houses, that switched to blue, which means that they will become the 38th state to ratify the ERA, which is wonderful, wonderful news. Everybody is very excited about it. Yay! Yay! There are processes. It didn't happen. It doesn't mean they've had the vote, but the people who were committed to vote yes on it were the folks that got elected. There's still, as I said, there are like everything in government, there are details, but we are definitely on the path to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Then as far as elections, one of the most interesting elections, and there were school board elections throughout the country, not here, although we're going to have a big school board election with all 5 seats up next year. But around the country, one of the most interesting ones was a young man who was in fact endorsed by the Network for Public Education, and he ran for his second time. He's 21 years old, and he is a restorative justice worker in the high school, and it was in Denver. And Denver has had a big change in who's on their board now. And right now, they had a great number of ed reformers who were looking to essentially undermine the district and the success of the district. And now it has flipped. Denver has flipped against the ed reform movement. And this young man, Tay Anderson, is one of the people who's doing it. So that was great news. Cincinnati had some different news. Cincinnati had an unusual person win. They had the president of the Southwest Ohio Teach for Americas who decided to run, and he won. He had a huge amount of money that was in behind him, and he won after the Cincinnati Teachers Union passed a resolution against Teach for America, saying that they were spending a tremendous amount of money on inexperienced teachers who didn't stay, and giving them additional professional development into a career that they didn't continue in. But the voters did pick Mr. Lindy. So Mr. Lindy from Teach for America, the president of Teach for America, is now on the Cincinnati Board of Education.
Well, that's going to be awkward.
Yeah. Well, he's got to recuse himself every once in a while. And then the last update for a vote, local, or two more California ones, local ones, are San Francisco. San Francisco passed the Housing Education $600 million bond, and the and Prop E, which allows educator housing projects and developments that are 100% affordable to be built on publicly owned land.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that could be any kind of affordable housing. So we're going to talk a little bit at the end about possibilities for West Contra Costa, but San Francisco is absolutely on track to do it. San Francisco overwhelmingly supported both of those measures. And then finally, locally, El Cerrito passed parks and pools, H on parks and pools with 77.8%, even though there was opposition to that, but it has been passed. So El Cerrito passed. That's our updates. Then the one thing I did want to say with respect to the international a picture, is that we now have a country that has a requirement to have climate change and the science around climate change taught to all of their children. And of course, this is not our country. This is another country. It is Italy. Italy is the first country to have it as a mandatory part of the science curriculum. So that's a big step forward, and we need to follow the Italians. We all need to follow the Italians because they're the ones taking the big steps forward. The rest of what's happened is this teacher strike in Chicago is over, which is very good news. There's been some changes statewide. The big thing that happened statewide in the last week is that the state has taken some really strong steps around supporting school districts impacted by the fires.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
All new stuff that we never,
Yeah.
and it fits on climate change, right? If any
Yes.
state should teach about climate change, it should be us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, we're being most affected.
we have a whole
Sure.
website now on the CDE page because of the impact that these fires have had and how many children have
On
lost
education.
days,
Yeah.
right? Either from the smoke or from the fires themselves.
Yeah. Schools that just burn down and the kids have to be sent to other places. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a big mess.
It's a very scary thing. And then so the strikes are over. Of course, the strikes aren't over. There's still strikes throughout the country. And I'll put the link into Education Dive, but there's a strike right now in Massachusetts. I think there's another strike in Illinois. Teachers are realizing that it does make a huge difference. And you have to stand up for your kids.
Yeah.
Right? And the public, I think, is getting to understand that, and the public is supportive. So that is pretty much what's happened. Now, the other thing was there was a study statewide on air in a classroom, and it's clear that not every classroom has a well-functioning air system. So UC Davis came out and proved like 85% of the classes they went to, and they were in portable rooms and in traditional buildings, had air that was subpar. So now it's something that the CBOC could look at, and something that all the maintenance guys should look at is our air, right? And that definitely can be done. And so there are calls to action around that as well. But I think the next thing we want to get to is the district, is West Contra Costa. So,
yes. Just about that, there was also some testing of lead in the pipes
right.
for certain schools, and there was so there's some things that need to be done about that as well.
These are all environmental justice issues.
Yes, yes.
Right? They're climate change and environmental justice issues.
Yeah, sure. Well, the district is moving along, but you know that expression like you're just constantly putting out fires?
Yeah.
That's the way I feel. I have all of these visions about learning and teaching and academic achievement that I know would have such a great impact on kids, but it's like, okay, now this thing's falling apart. We have to fix that, put this fire out. It's almost as if there are forces out there who are trying to sabotage our district and setting it up on purpose to fail. That's just kind of how it feels in the background there. We're targeted, especially because of so many children of color and poverty. There are still those people circling who think the school district is a cash cow and that they can make money off it. And the more chaos there is, the easier it makes for them to come in and just, take it apart and actually privatize everything. That's kind of one of the big goals for that. But the more they can say it's a failing district, then it's for their benefit. So, so you got to weigh the activity, where you're going to put your energy. But I'm going to go through, I'm going to forge ahead and try to make as much change for the better as I can in the district. And one of our key places we want to see some change is in Stige Elementary School. And we there has been some special things done for Stige with the teachers, getting high quality teachers And I remember I went the first week I went down there, and I saw nothing but positive things. Teachers that just had their classrooms in control. I even saw kids that were sitting this way, you know, waiting for the teacher to. And one teacher said to me, you know, these kids, they want to learn. They've been wanting, it's like they've been, you know, waiting for somebody to be there to teach them. And they were getting that. So anyway, there's still a lot of issues, of course, around Stige, and we have to stay vigilant.
We have to stay focused.
Focused.
Right?
Yeah,
Focused on moving forward. And so there's a community group that comes together and is meeting. And one of the things about the community group is it meets at the school in the evenings, and it's difficult for parents to get there. So we've talked about this, and one thing that might work is moving those meetings to where the parents live. Many of the parents whose children attend Stige live in a housing environment where there is a community center that's available to them, where the meetings could be brought to them. And I think that you have to pay attention when you realize that the parents are not available at the hour that you're offering it, and you know where they are, you can bring the meeting to them. So I did suggest to them at the last meeting that happened, so that they don't feel left out, because this is what happens is you run a party and nobody comes, and then you blame the people that didn't come, instead of trying to figure out how you can what you need to change in order to bring their voices in. And then also just to be more clear on the purpose of and the timeline of what they're doing. If they're doing a redesign, then the redesign needs to be in place in time to bring in the staff that will implement it. And that would be in January. And this is November. And I have here the first conversation we had about it, which was last February. So that's what the timeline has been. And so as we look forward, it's my great hope that the timeline gets accelerated and into a way that it will actually serve the families at Stige.
Yeah, what we don't want, and we often see people trying to bring about change in schools from the top down, and that never works.
No.
So you've got, I mean, it's okay, give us some guidance and some resources, etc. Leadership, you got to have strong leadership, but it also needs to come from the bottom up.
Right.
The parents.
And the
teachers.
teachers.
And the teachers
have
who
to
are
feel
there
that
in
you
the
are
classroom.
not wasting their time.
Yeah, so they need to be just as strong in their input and making this vision come true of what we want to see for Stige. So I was at that meeting and I was not happy. It was very disappointing. It was confusing. So, I mean, that was the first time I went there, but I understand that a lot of people felt that as well.
Yeah, including people who've gone to all of the meetings.
From the beginning.
From the beginning. And so anyway, we have gone to, certainly there are meetings that the district runs that are very well facilitated by experienced facilitators.
Oh, yes.
And
yes. Yeah.
This wasn't one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there needs to be a shift here so that at the end people do feel heard. They feel like the information was captured. At those other meetings, the information is all captured.
Yeah.
Here,
yeah.
that
Right.
was not the case at all.
Yeah.
It's not the case at all. So there's room to improve that, and I hope it's improved, and it's improved on a very short timeline, so that it will make a difference, and we don't have another year of just vague promises.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Which is what I'm afraid of.
So we're keeping an eye on that, and we'll report as we find more, as we have good news, for sure. Could I mention, let's see, CBOC for a minute?
Oh yes, let's talk about the CBOC.
I'm on the CBOC as the liaison for the board, and I feel my job is to look over the shoulder of the CBOC.
Now tell them who the CBOC is.
Oh, the
Some
CBOC
people might not know.
Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. And they look over, when we get a bond and money for facilities, they look over how we spend that money, just to make sure we're not spending it on salaries or anything else except facilities.
Right, just what we promised to do.
What we
That's
promised to
basically
do.
their goal is to make sure that the community members, the taxpayers, that promises are kept. This is
Yeah.
what we said we were going to do in the ballot language, and this is what we
we're
did.
doing. And I went to Sacramento, and I heard, what the role of
We
them
went. We
are.
went to
We went together.
to the Kalbach meeting.
And it's just that it just feels like this CBOC for this district has just overgrown, and one of the charges it has is to save the district money. And it's really failing at that, as far as I'm concerned, because there are extra meetings, there's subcommittees, there's all kinds of paperwork requested. And every single time they do that, and there's a big thick documents that have to be printed and distributed, all of that costs us money. It doesn't save us any money. And there are districts that have very small documents for annual report, and it's perfectly fine. And they meet maybe 4 times, the minimum 4 times a year, to look over, make sure we're doing what we said we're going to do. I mean, you don't have. So anyway, it just feels like this one is kind of overblown, and that to me is the issue. It's not saving us money, and now at this time when we need that, that it needs to be changed. So we're looking at the CBOC policy. They're going to be looking at it at governance. So if you're interested, go there, and also they'll be bringing it to the board eventually. But to me, it's a very serious problem, as I observe, and I'll be reporting back about that. But to me, that's the issue right there. So that was just been on my mind, and I wanted to share that.
And we have to be conscious of how we're spending money. That really is the fact here. So I think the more we highlight what we're doing and why we're doing it, and revisit things, just because it worked that way at one point when there were many different projects being done at the same time. Now that things are getting much slower, and it's only one project, and it's not a huge project in the scheme of projects,
Just kind of.
maybe you approach that with a different level of support.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't need that same level.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So that needs to be, and there were folks who were members of the CBOC who brought that up themselves.
They did. Yeah. So they're aware. There are people in there that, and so
There are different opinions.
Different opinions. So what they need to do is put that on the agenda, discuss it, and vote on it, not just shoot it down and say, no, we're not going to do that. So, and that's what I saw happening. So they do need to get, focus on some of those issues. And
Well, I think he will. I think that the chair has his own certain opinions, but I did hear him say that he was going to do that. So
and have it on the agenda.
I think he'll be, he will entertain the conversation.
That's great. And of course, the other big thing is concerns our budget. That's very, very big right now. And there will be another presentation on November the 20th. So if you want to see more of the story, please come to that one, and hopefully we'll get the information before. You will also be able to read the information before that night so that you can respond to it. And one of the things that we talked about with in terms of generating revenue, and we've talked about our properties and the different properties that we have. So it is the direction of the board. We want to revisit that. We're very interested, and we have some ideas.
There are multiple things you can do with properties, and one thing that this district has explored was putting 2 things together, 2 important values. And one of them is serving our workforce, right? Workforce housing. And we explored workforce housing and have a number of reports, and I'll actually link them in our YouTube description so anybody who's interested can take a look at them. But what those reports approved was that it's very expensive for us to do any digging, and workforce housing generally requires digging, right, and to
Yes.
do construction. And the vision was more around other districts had done apartment buildings, and so for varieties of reasons, the properties that we have have
Not
engineering
usable.
problems
Yeah, not
that
usable.
cause them to not be able to be eligible for that. But there are other choices, and this is where you really have to think outside the box. One thing that came to our attention recently is the world of the tiny house, the smaller house. And there is nothing that would keep us from putting tiny houses on properties that we own. And those properties then could become, we could be leased out and could bring a profit stream, an income stream into the district. The district could make money. Our workforce could come and live in the tiny house communities. And tiny house communities look a lot of different ways, and I will put a link in to the one that I'm really looking at, which is it's called the Tiny 10, and it's in Reno. And it's in downtown Reno, and it's a community that's designed to provide housing needs. We could do a version of that on Seaview, on Adams, and on the Portola side. You could easily do that on any of those, because all you have to do is make it into a parking lot. That's what has to be first.
That'd be a
It
parking
can
lot.
all be a parking lot, and we have other parking lots. So I think if we really wanted to, that's something that we could look at as an income stream, and that would also allow us to keep our buildings. And we could even partner with the cities if necessary. We'd have to do there might be some zoning changes, but the tiny homes are not going to necessarily cause any view problems. It would not take long to put them up. Anyhow, I'll put the links in so people can see them. And the other thing is, we would not be the first district to look to tiny homes for teacher housing. Vail, Arizona has that distinction of being the first one to do it. So it makes sense, and it wouldn't just necessarily, it could be teacher housing. Not every teacher wants to, certainly not, it's not for everybody, but for people who are interested in small, in a minimalist way of living, it definitely is a fit. It definitely is a fit. So I think that, so we will look at it, and I hope that the district looks at it, rather than doing very expensive. The deal is, when you get into these other things of doing property swaps and sales, you're bringing in consultants. You have to pay for consultants. You have to bring in, they're going to get a cut. Everybody gets a cut. The real estate people on every end of it get a cut. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. So it's an idea, but it is an idea that we've explored.
And of course, these would all be union-built little houses, and eco-friendly. I mean, there's just so many possibilities.
An eco-friendly education village, one right after another.
It's a wonderful idea. So that's definitely on the table for.
It's on our table.
It's on our table.
Now it's on your table, because you've heard about it.
You heard about it here. Okay, shall we go now to the resolutions?
Let's do the resolutions, and then we'll do take action. Okay. So the resolutions, there are a couple of resolutions out there. Two in particular, there are three, but so the three of them are, one of them is from Mount Diablo, who did a resolution on a charter renewal. Right, and they did a resolution with respect to Clayton Valley, which is the charter for them. And they wanted the county to understand the impact that Clayton Valley's continuing as a charter has on their traditional district. Right? And so that's the kind of resolution that West Contra Costa could have with respect to the schools that the county is going to be looking at.
Yeah, making waves
and caliber.
And caliber, because those are under the county, because the district said no.
Yes.
I mean, we made a decision that's not to our best interest, and they can go over your head, and then they were approved over there, and yet they're in our district.
Right.
So it's a very weird kind of situation. I
So
think.
anyway, this is
But,
a resolution
that
that
would
could be
yes, that's one.
looked at. Another one is the gifts, grants, and bequests.
Yes, that's very.
And that exists. Everybody's got different versions of it. But what they don't really all do is make them transparent, so that the community members can see who are the folks making the big gifts, so that you can understand and be grateful, but also that you can understand how much, the degree to which the district or any district is relying upon philanthropy. And we could rethink the one we have, and there are other versions of it. And the big thing that none of them seem to have, that I could see so far, is a place where they really call out on one page, for example, here is the money that we've received from philanthropy, and here are the various grants that we're applying for.
Yes.
Right?
And one thing I've noticed on a lot of them, they specify about the district having control of how the money is spent. Because oftentimes these philanthropists want power, control, and influence on the district for their own interest. And then they'll donate all of this money for a reason, for a purpose. And when you know who they are and how they work, then it becomes more clear. And we need to say, oh no, this is not a good idea, or yeah, this is one with no strings attached,
Yeah.
or this one's conflict of interest. We need to know all that. We can't know it if we don't know who they are.
No. So it's just really bringing that out into the sunshine, right?
Yes.
Sunshining our donors is really what we're talking about.
Yes.
And the final one is that the one I mentioned before that Cincinnati did, and they the board didn't adopt it, but the teachers union did. And what that was its own resolution, and I believe actually San Francisco has done this, because San Francisco has discontinued its relationship with Teach for America.
Oh, wow.
And other districts
You need to
do
do
too.
that.
So you don't have to do a resolution, but you could do a resolution.
Could do one.
And the teachers union in Cincinnati did do one. Of course, then the young man got elected, so he's on the
There
board.
you go.
So there's conflict over there. The other thing I wanted to do next was the actions.
Oh, before
Oh, you
that,
got-
there's just the ethnic studies
Oh yeah, go ahead. That's a
resolution
resolution.
that I wrote and I've submitted, and hopefully it'll be on the agenda soon. I actually like the title. It's Ethnic and Social Justice Studies. And I'm so proud of it. Maybe I'll put it on Facebook. I don't know.
Oh, I
would like people to read it and give me some responses, because it's I just think it's so necessary for our children to know not just about the history, but about how to make change
Right.
in
Right.
the world.
And
That's
that
why
curriculum is
so-
out there. We're just not using it.
Yes, and what better place? This is where it needs to happen. So I've sent it out to a few people. I do think I'll post it. I'd love to have more input, and hopefully it'll be on the agenda soon, and we could start to work on it. And
Right.
it's very teacher-driven also, which is as it should be. Okay,
Absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
mine.
So that's our.
Yeah.
So we'll keep giving you updates on what's happening with each of the resolutions as we move forward. Because
Yes.
as you remember, we originally we had a moratorium on charter schools resolutions.
That's what started.
We've
it.
talked about resolutions for a while.
Yes.
So the action alerts for everybody that all of us can do. The first one is making waves, Wave Watch, and that is to support the Pinole community around making sure that there is not another elementary school in Pinole that Making Waves is trying to expand into, because it will, without question, have an incredibly negative impact on the district schools that are in Pinole. And this is why 1505 was passed, so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen. So that's part of it. And then the other thing is Pinole needs to build housing there. And so the conversation right now is for Pinole, the Pinole Planning Department, the City Planning Department, to understand that they don't need another school in that property. So that's Making Waves, Pinole